So they spent $8 million to make mice transgender. Remember when Alex Jones said they making the frogs gay?
He was right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
It turned out they were making the frogs gay.
How much did they spend on that?
That's a good question.
Hold on.
Welcome to my YouTube channel where you get educative and entertaining content. If you're new to this channel, please do subscribe and watch till the end. Also like and leave a comment in the comment section below. Let's get into the video.
Because it came out of Trump's mouth, shame on you.
One thing we should note is that Elon Musk got a huge ovation at the State of the Union, but when he got in the room with those members of Congress yesterday, it was apparently much less effusive because they were worried. The fact is that if you ask Americans, should we eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse from the government, you'll get a lot of response for that. If you start defining waste, fraud, and abuse as things that they value and workers that are essential, they're going to have a much different view. So the initial blush of Musk with his chainsaw may have had some resonance. The fact that he's cutting down stuff indiscriminately, less so.
Well, it's not all indiscriminate. I mean, we don't really need the transgender mice, do we? I mean,
That's not even real.
It is real. I'm sorry, man. It's real.
No, listen.
Is it real or not?
Hey, hold on a second.
Did we have to say it was real or not?
No, hold on.
It's real.
I mean, Musk was a sheep.
How about the
It's a real thing.
No,
So my point is,
listen. What they weren't talking about trans.
Don't defend the mice.
No. Listen, you don't want to talk about it. We don't talk about it. But it wasn't transgender. It was a different term that was misinterpreted as transgender. They were actually doing basic medical experiments on mice to figure out.
Don't spoil a good troll.
It's just not true.
Jennings is having a good troll. Don't spoil it.
Here's the point. They have found some things.
Yes.
And the greatest public relations advice I could give them is this. You found stuff, you're going to find more stuff, and there's going to come a point where you could take this to the Congress and have a really good hearing and a really good public display. That is the next iteration.
For the record, this is not a new thing.
Yes. No.
Yeah, you notice how they didn't answer the question. So CNN basically had to go back and re-edit.
I saw this on X. Yeah, they had to, because they basically came out and said Trump was wrong, and then it turns out he wasn't wrong, so they had to correct themselves.
So they spent $8 million to make mice transgender. Remember when Alex Jones said they making the frogs gay?
He was right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It turned out they were making the frogs gay.
How much did they spend on that?
That's a good question.
Hold on. They was actually turning the frogs gay.
Yeah, there was like a chemical in the water they were giving the frogs that was making them gay.
He was close enough. Regardless, frogs.
So they was putting it in the water.
Why is that surprising? Now that we know that they were turning the mice trans, it makes sense they were turning the frogs gay.
No wonder why they don't got no water in California.
Everybody been...
I'm joking.
Hey, bro, that is... that is actually hilarious.
Scroll down,
bro.
let's read it.
Oh my God, that's hilarious, bro.
So CNN backfired on one of its fact checks of President Donald Trump's address to a joint session of Congress after claiming he falsely asserted that federal money was used on transgender experiments with mice. CNN journalist Deard McPhillips asserted that Trump falsely claimed Tuesday night that the Department of Government Efficiency identified $8 million that was spent on making mice transgender. Instead, she argued that grants were given to projects applied to hormone therapy to monkeys to understand the effects on HIV treatment.
Wow.
Scroll down just a little more. It says the fact check continued. Transgender women 50 times more likely to be infected. However, an edited version of the fact check changed the assertion on Wednesday from falsely claimed to needs context, adding the White House has since put out a list of federal grants involving mice receiving transgender treatments. Or it says receiving gender transition treatments.
CNN is cooked.
We spent $8 million.
Wow. At first, I really thought it was false.
I did too.
Damn.
Why would it be false?
Because it doesn't seem real that we would spend $8 million on making a mice transgender.
It says more about the White House list. It says the White House list made clear what Trump in the speech did not. The studies were meant to figure out how these treatments might affect the health of human who take them, and not for the purpose of making mice transgender.
Hold on, bro. Why would
the fact
that
check
be
now reads though?
So they're just cutting off the rats' balls and testicles and making it have a coochie.
Pretty much, I guess.
So are they putting a dangling on the female?
Hold on, we don't know. Hold on, no, go back up. Right.
That's a real question.
It says the article has been updated with context about the spending, which was for research studies on the potential human health impacts of treatments used in gender affirming care.
Wow.
And remember, we just pulled up that study the other day from Oxford that said gender affirming surgery causes mental health problems, and Oxford is a liberal school.
Damn.
Statement. Good afternoon.
Late last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys.
This is shit is crazy,
These DEI grants funded painful and deadly transgender experiments that forced
the
lab
devil.
animals
Where's
to undergo
Peter at?
invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country.
Damn.
For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars,
That's the devil, bro.
$2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice.
That's weird.
They know they're not going to have babies.
Let that sink
and they
in.
still trying
We
to
spent over
see.
$2 million studying the fertility of transgender mice. So we spent over $1 million to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapy were more likely to overdose on a date rape drug.
Wow.
Like, that's what your taxpayer dollars were
million.
being spent on. Federal funds were also used to forcibly transition male monkeys to see if hormone therapy made them more susceptible to HIV.
Wow.
Now, I didn't know this until recently, but
Transgender.
monkeys cannot be infected with HIV. Yet this federally funded experiment forced them
What?
to take hormone-altering drugs to study a virus they cannot have.
Monkeys
They were
can't have
surgically
HIV?
mutating animal
monkey.
genitals.
people
Like,
are
taxpayer money
freaks.
went to that. So my question is, were they
This is evil,
castrating
bro.
mice, castrating monkeys? Were they
That's
getting double
insane.
mastectomies? The language that they used in many of these experiments were, quote, gender affirming care, which I learned about 3 years ago what that meant. I thought that was maybe just some hormones or something something like that. But apparently gender affirming care is actually surgical mutilation of genitals. And apparently it's not just humans they're doing it to. We were doing it with taxpayer dollars to animals.
Wow.
43 pounds of the fentanyl that was seized came from
None of these
Canada,
are
so
valuable
about
disease.
0.2% of the total amount. And then lastly, the president said that millions are being spent on, quote, making
know
mice
that's true.
transgender. That claim is false.
That last one there, Laura, making mice transgender.
Why they
What's the
only
reality
lie?
there?
So again,
They
the
wanna make
idea
him
that
look bad,
scientists
bro.
are making mice transgender is false. The kinds of research experiments that President Trump and the White House were pointing to is basic scientific research. These
a
studies were not
correspondent?
studying if gender affirming care works. That's a
Right.
legal medical treatment that's endorsed by major U.S. medical associations. These experiments were studying the effects of gender affirming hormones on asthma and on whether gender affirming hormones increase breast cancer risk. So if someone is
How would you
getting
know
gender
if
affirming
mice compared to
care,
a
does it
human
make
body, bro?
an HIV vaccine less effective on that person?